I have come to discover that a toxic job can create a toxic life. I've seen it firsthand. I'm thinking about being short with my children, being too exhausted to engage with anyone, all of the emotions that I can't take out at work, taking out on my loved ones.
So, pop quiz. Your boss throws a salad at your coworker. Do you A, duck for cover, B, quit on the spot, or C, shake the feta crumbles out of your hair and pretend like it didn't happen? Well, hopefully you do not have to make any of those terrible choices. But in case you do, today's guest, Mita Mallick, has survived every kind of bad boss, and she's here today to spill the survival strategies corporate HR will never tell you. Welcome, Mita.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Lisa, so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
I am too. I mean, can we just start? Did your boss really throw a shoe at you?
Chanel shoe at my colleague, technically, and it missed her. And yeah, she did. I mean, it was the first time in my life anyone had ever screamed at me. I always say in the workplace, first time.
Screaming and throwing shoes. Wow. What? I mean, okay, of course, never acceptable, right? But like, give us a little bit of context. Was it like a sudden freak out? Was this a slow burn? Like, what the heck happened?
So her name was Medusa, and in the Devil Emails at Midnight, what good leaders can learn from bad bosses, I nickname all the bosses, and I do that for purpose. I've always nicknamed my bosses,
Yeah.
particularly the bad ones, but it is to create emotional distance from
Mm-hmm.
yourself. This was back in the day in the beauty industry, and she had one team of 12 people she was overseeing. That team turned over. And then she went to lead another team at this organization. And I was voluntold, wasn't asked. I was told, you have to go do this assignment. And I worked for her. And over the course of the time I worked for her, that team also turned over. And so it was, like I said, I had never been screamed at, not by my parents, my brother, my husband. I didn't certainly tolerate that from my friends. And then all of a sudden you're in the workplace screaming, shouting, yelling, throwing things, throwing pens, calling you stupid to your face, saying that I wore basic clothes. She wore Chanel and lots of it. I couldn't afford to wear Chanel. So I wore what I could to work. But the private and public humiliation. And one of the things that I think about now, you like, it sounds like it's from a movie, and it could very well be as well. But I think bad bosses are born anywhere, anytime. Meaning they're not born, they're made, but they can spring up, right, in any industry. But I do think some industries are exceptionally good at creating them. So anytime there's a scarcity mindset, like in beauty, everyone wants these jobs. If you're not going to tolerate this behavior, there's 10 other people lined up for your job. Meta jobs maybe in Hollywood, investment banking, name the hot brand of the moment, which
Yeah.
probably has fallen from grace by the time people listen to this. But
Yeah.
there's always something where it's like, well, we're going to put up with this because this is the job. This is the
Wow.
brand name to have on your resume.
That's incredible. I mean, so what you're talking about is the patently abusive, like mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and physically abusive things that people can endure on the job. And so, just backing up for a second. So, you lived through this experience and many others that we could certainly talk about. Was this part of your origin story? Because ultimately, you became a professional who goes into toxic workplaces and helps people sort through this, change systems. I hope. Part of what you do is coaching leaders to be better. Was this part of your origin story?
I am the proud daughter of Indian immigrant parents. I lost my dad in 2017, rest in peace. But I was born and raised in the US with my younger brother outside of Boston. And I grew up in a time and a place where it was not cool to be Indian. I was the funny looking, dark skinned girl who had a long, funny looking braid, whose parents spoke funny English until it wasn't funny anymore. And I was bullied a lot, both verbally and physically by my peers. We were three families of color, a handful of families of color in this town. And they made me know every day that I did not belong in this community. And that and a number of experiences I had growing up have really driven me and fueled me to think, well, this can't be the way. Like why should anyone feel this way? Why should we be othered, ostracized, made to feel like that we don't belong? And that sort of fueled me to the point where let me say this, I was naive when I entered corporate America. I didn't think that those bullies from the classroom and the playground would follow me into the hallways and conference rooms. Like, I didn't realize the bullies would grow up and here they would be again. But I saw, clear patterns. And as we were discussing at one point earlier, and I was thinking about this, that in some ways, when you have had traumatic things happen to your childhood, and I know you think about this for your work and your living, is that you're attracted to those things as an adult too. And so, wow, you've had a lot of bad bosses. Well, I've also worked in a lot of different places and spaces. And some years I had three bad bosses. This happens in, three bosses, maybe two of them were bad in one year. This happens in large organizations. But also the question I ask myself now is, was I attracted to these people?
Mm.
Were they familiar? At the same time, I often will operate like I'm in survival mode in my career. And I know other people who will do this. And there is this idea that there's nothing like that stable paycheck, that you wouldn't walk away from that, and that your family and other people have endured so much more than you are with the woman who's throwing a Chanel shoe. Okay, big deal. It's a great job. It's a great brand name. It's on your resume. There's prestige, there's power. I tell people I work here, right? There's a lot to walk away from that. And people will say, well, toughen up. It's not that big of a deal. My boss did work. That's what bosses do. She'll move on. You'll get over it. How could you leave that job? Right. So then there's all of those things in your mind as well that you're carrying, that, well, I can just do this for a bit longer and a bit longer and a bit longer and a bit longer, turns out to 1, 2, 3 years.
Yeah. And that starts to take a toll, doesn't it? I think that there's not enough conversation and awareness of workplace trauma and what it does to someone being in these types of environments, particularly for years.
And it's just like it's a relationship you're in, and you're there for so many hours a day, sometimes more than you are at home. And so you are there for 8 hours or more, and with technology, it seems like you're never off sometimes. And so that, loud form of abuse or quiet abuse, you start to lose pieces of yourself and you don't even realize until you wake up one morning and you're like, "Where did I go? Who am I? Where am I?" Because over the course of minutes, hours, days, weeks, pieces of you are gone that you have to refind.
I think that sometimes the very first step in changing things begins with awareness. And that often does come from hearing the stories of other people and having these moments of recognition where, like, oh, yes, me too, right? And so you have endured all kinds of hostility and abusive behavior from bosses throughout your life. And I know that you've also been an observer and a witness of this in the lives of other people. What are some of the common um, things that you see happening to people and inside people, maybe in their other relationships, as a result of this workplace trauma?
I have come to discover that a toxic job can create a toxic life. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen when I worked for Tony Soprano, who I talk about in the book, who's the boss who demanded loyalty at all costs, and how hostile that work environment was that he created. He's one of the three bosses that really impacted my mental health. Bad bosses are sort of on a spectrum, right? But if I think about him and Medusa and one other, that they really impacted my well being. And it is you bring it home with you. So when I mean that it creates a toxic life, I'm thinking about being short with my children, being too exhausted to engage with anyone, all of the emotions that I can't take out at work, taking out on my loved ones, my husband, my kids, being angry. And my kids were very young then. So it's like, you just are like, wow, like that, you can't compartmentalize it. You bring it home with you and you start to see how you are then lashing out, because there's no space at work necessarily to be processing these feelings, particularly if it is a dynamic where the person who is targeting you has power and privilege in the workplace. there may be very little you can do to speak up. And if you do speak up, you may be labeled a detractor, a troublemaker, pot stirrer, all of those things. And so it absolutely seeps into your home light. I also have found in those moments, career wise, I've isolated myself socially. I've gone off the radar. I've disappeared from friends. My self confidence has been low. I do not want to engage with people who say to me, well, just toughen up. Why aren't you quitting? Why, all the things that maybe aren't helpful that people will say in the moment, because these are things that I've thought of and can give you a litany of excuses as to why I didn't move on quicker. But the isolation socially can be really hard because, as you said, people don't talk about workplace trauma enough. So then they're not aware of it. And then you are regretting that you shared anything. And then you start to pull back.
Of course, you're sort of made to feel like the reasons why staying are delegitimized and don't really want to go into that. But at the same time, um, I mean, I think any abusive relationship where these type of power and control dynamics, part of the mechanics, the force that does keep people in there is at least to some degree this enrollment in the idea of maybe it kind of was my fault. Maybe if I could do it differently or better, or if I hadn't said the thing, I can manage this. Is that something that you've seen in yourself and other people, the self blame
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
keeps, yeah,
And I think it's the idea that you can outwork the situation. Just some more hard work and discipline will change the result. If I am the only one being targeted, and when I go to the Medusa example, she was targeting everybody. Interestingly enough, you create a sense of community sometimes with a bad boss. Those are people, listen, I'd hang up on you now if someone called me right then from those days, right? Like we were just like bonded by the trauma so there's interesting ways where people will either, target at scale or target in isolation. And some bullies in the workplace are really good at targeting in isolation. And so there may be other people being targeted on your team, but you don't know because they've done such a good job of isolating everyone. And then you start to think it's me, it's my work product. I have to just work harder. I have to, and the thing that I finally came to realize is that you can't outwork the bully. I cannot work with really go back to my days working for Medusa, and let me tell you, I was scared every day coming to work, but I worked really hard because I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna just work as hard as I can so she doesn't come after me." It didn't matter though. She'd come after anyone in the end, and so then what ends up happening is, I mean, imagine you come to work every day scared and then you get tired. You're like, I don't want to, like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. And then you start to disengage. You start to go under the radar. You start to think, well, whatever I do is going to be the same result. And then you end up slowly headed towards burnout.
right, right. Was there a pivotal moment for you in this situation, or maybe there were others that came after this? But I guess I'm curious to know if there was finally either an event or something that changed inside of you that allowed you to take a step back and be like, and we're done.
Yeah. I think in the Medusa situation in particular, there was a friend I had isolated myself from, a group of friends I hadn't seen in a while. And I think it was, and these are people I saw regularly. It was like a year and a half later, year plus, I went to have dinner with them. And there's nothing like a friend who's a mirror. And they were just shocked at how I looked. Not so much that maybe I had lost weight or was physically like different, but just that the light in my eyes was
Yeah,
gone. And
energetically.
yes, and they were like, "You've got to get out. We're gonna help you." And, in all these moments, I'm grateful. I've had great community of people who've always helped me, and I feel like I helped them in return, but helped me, as I say, start one of my many get out plans to think about how am I gonna use this energy to be proactive to figure out what I'm gonna do next. And I'm not always saying that people need to quit their companies. Sometimes it's about thinking about, is there a way to get away from this leader, from Mita at this organization, move on to another team, right? Is there a way to go to another division? But really coming up with that exit strategy and what you want to do next is so important.
Yeah. But you're saying that you needed an intervention. You needed
Intervention,
other
yeah.
people to
Yeah, I
reflect
do.
back and be
Yeah,
like, you are not
yeah,
okay. This
yes,
has to stop. Because
yeah.
I think that when you're in these systems and it's this dynamic, it can be really difficult to get that perspective yourself, which is why it is so important to have connections. And as hard as it is, because when we're not in a good place, like the last thing you feel like doing is going out and seeing a friend and is, like having those kinds of conversations, but that it's really vital to our survival in some ways is to have
It
those
is. And
connections.
sometimes when you are being you're trying to survive under a really bad boss,
Yeah.
people do become isolated.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
there's no way to actually have someone be a mirror to get out because many
Yeah.
times the people you are working with, either they're being targeted or they're not. And they're like, it's not a big deal or not to the level you are. And this is the most amazing brand you're going to have on your resume. Like,
Yeah.
think of the doors this is going to open. Like, this is the conversations that people will have. And it's really interesting. I was just catching up on the American Apparel series that
Mm,
just came on
mhm.
Netflix about that toxic culture, and I
Yeah.
didn't really know much about the story until I watched the series, and I'm like, "My god, another ridiculously toxic, horrifying leader."
Yeah.
And everyone sort of knew what was going on, and it was like this cult where they tolerated it, and now these people are coming out and talking about it, but they also were isolated. They didn't know a lot of people outside their company. They were
Mm,
all together
yeah.
tolerating different levels of abuse.
Right. But Mita, this is why like your book is so incredibly important, and even podcast conversations like these are so important because this gives people visibility into the experience that helps them develop that awareness, particularly in the absence of some of those connections. Because you're absolutely right, particularly when you're depleted and traumatized and burned out, it cultivates the isolation, which then perpetuates the cycle. Okay. You know, well, this is big stuff. And okay, there's a lot to unpack here because, interestingly, and just like to share another perspective, I think certainly in these power and control dynamics, toxic leaders, and I have known a number of entrepreneurs, every single one of them is also carrying trauma from their experiences of running an organization and sometimes related to things that their employees have done. So I think that in many of these environments, like none of these relationships are safe. And it's so hard because, again, I think the hope is that we can connect with an organization where there's a positive culture, where there will be a genuine, caring about our well being and development. Like we're all working together as a team. And that is often what these situations look like on the surface when you're coming in the door. So I would love to hear even some of your recommendations, if you have any, about things to look for, questions to ask, red flags that can help you understand what you're getting into before you are now in the system and
Yeah.
collecting paychecks. And
Yeah.
are there
Well,
any early warning
yeah.
signs?
Well, let me tell you, Dr. Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of warning signs. I ignored them all. I ignored the
Blew
red
right
flags
past.
because you know what? I wanted the brand name.
Right.
I wanted to be able to say I worked here and the prestige and the limelight and
Mm.
all of those things. And I was willing to just pretend those flags didn't exist. One of the interviews I'll never forget, I had 11 rounds in person and they didn't offer me a glass of water. I went through like 11 rounds. And I think I had brought a bottle of water, but it was never like, do you want to? I didn't even
Yeah.
have
Do you
lunch.
need to
A
take a
tea break?
break?
No. I think at
Wow.
one point I said I need to use the ladies' bathroom and someone brought me like it was that. And my mother said to me, they didn't offer you a glass of water? And I said, no. And she said, don't take the job. Why would you want to work
Mom.
somewhere? Mom was on it. And I was like, Mom, it's this brand. Of course I'm going to work there. So there was that flag. There was also the flag that the recruiter was like, we need you to schedule all of these in one day next week. We were like, okay, a lot of people who are looking for a job are also still working, right?
Yeah.
And so then there's that balance and you have other obligations. So you do that. Then I'll never forget, and this is another sign, is that if the interviewer who is going to be your future boss is distracted, disengaged, talks over you,
Hmm.
minimizes what you're saying, look for those nonverbals. If they don't even seem like they're happy to be there, That's like I say, I love a good movie trailer. This is the movie trailer. This is the preview of things to come. Because if I am a hiring manager and I've hired many of people, I want to be on my best behavior. Of course, I'm
Yeah.
trying to court you. So if
Yeah.
I'm on my worst behavior or not such a great behavior in the interview, what does that mean about what I'm actually like to work for? Right. So watch for
That's
the
good.
interviewers as well. Like, are they all coming in late repetitively? Do they not seem to apologize for it? And this is, I'm talking about not on the same day, but rounds of interviews. I've been in Dr. Lisa situations where people tell me not to join. They'll write out, tell
Like
me,
slipping you a
they'll be
note,
like, yeah. And you're
run.
like, okay. Anytime that it's like hot and cold, they rush to schedule all these interviews, months go by, they don't contact you, and then they're back again trying to court you. Watch on LinkedIn or Indeed, are those job postings just circulating and coming back out again? Anytime a recruiter wants you to accept a job on the spot, that's a flag. Why can't I think about it, talk to my family, talk to my partner, spouse? Like, why do I have to accept this today? Is a flag. All of those things. But then what else can you do? What I say is, I always get the offer, then I'm in the driver's seat. And then I say, I'd like to schedule 2 additional meetings before I think about accepting the offer. And usually that's again with the boss, because then it's just an unfiltered, Dr. Lisa, let me just talk to you about what's your leadership style? What's my leadership style? What keeps you up at night? What are your priorities for the rest of the year? Right. You can get a sense. And then to somebody who would be your peer, who is going also reports into the current boss. And most companies will say yes. Don't go back and ask for 10. But if you ask for 2 conversations, most hiring managers are excited to meet again because they're like, okay, now I can just meet and chat, tell you what it's really like to work here, that I'm really excited for you to join. Really important. Then we talk about Glassdoor, Fishbowl. Take those things with a grain of salt, but there's reviews everywhere on employers, and you can do reference checks on companies. Now, isn't that novel?
No, I
Right?
did
You
not know
can,
that was a
well, this
thing.
is how you do. This is what I coined it, but you can go and like look up X company and start to look up people who worked there.
Like on
And
LinkedIn.
yes, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and try to
Oh.
go through your network and see, is anyone currently working there? Like maybe Dr. Elisa's cousin works at
Mhm.
this company. I can ask for an intro. Most people will give you 10 minutes of their time, or somebody who used to work there. Ask them. And you can do informal reference checks. Absolutely. We should all be doing reference checks on companies.
What a good idea. Oh my gosh, this is so good. They're so actionable too. Okay, so recap. Um, Human interactions that just lack empathy and communicate a disregard for your basic need, rights, or feelings. People who are not showing up in a positive way and just reminding yourself that this is as good as it's ever going to
Yes.
get, right? This is the first date, okay? But then additionally, asking for additional interviews where you can get more intel. But also, too, I would think that if, like, just typically, if you really ever want to find out if somebody's a narcissist or has like a weird antisocial vibe, ask them for something that inconveniences them just a tiny bit, and how they react to that can tell you a lot. And that's almost what I was hearing you say, and asking for another interview, going outside of the standard protocol or getting them to slow down, and how do they react. But then also, just finding creative ways to get more honest information. And in my experience, like if something really bad has gone down, most people are um they don't take pleasure necessarily in sharing like bad news, but I think that they feel a responsibility to warn
Yes,
others. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, what a fantastic recap. That was great.
that- I could ask a couple of different questions now. Do you tend to see people getting out of one of these situations and right back into another similar one if they don't become aware of their own vulnerabilities to repeat these patterns? Or is it just like a one-time thing and then people are
Oh,
like,
I've done that.
never doing that again?
I've done it. I've done it. Yeah, I've done it. And a part of it was I didn't heal from one toxic workplace situation to another. And then also, I love to be a people pleaser. I love to save the day, go in with my cape and wand, and yes, I'm gonna fix this. So I am attracted to businesses that are struggling. toxic work environments that maybe I can go and fix and I can be a better leader. And the interesting thing is, yes, change can start with one person, but it can't start with one person if the rest of the system doesn't want it to change. So I spent time in too many places where I tried to change things where other people didn't want to help. Like you one person can start it, but there needs to be a groundswell. And if there's not that groundswell, it becomes incredibly debilitating for the person. Like, it's really, really tough. But yeah, absolutely. Like, if you don't identify those patterns of the things that you're attracted to and why, then you find yourself in these situations. Now, I'm not excusing bad
Oh,
bosses
no,
or
no, we're
toxic
not blaming the
workplaces, right.
person. No, no,
Well,
no,
yeah, but
no.
it's also like I'm aware that,
Mhm.
you know, these are my tendencies now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm aware of the things that I'm
Mhm.
attracted to, but I'm also, because of my upbringing and things that I went through, that my standards for what I will tolerate in relationships has been low.
Yeah, I get that.
And so then that translates into the workplace where you're like, well, that's normally how I've been treated. It's okay. And it's not okay. Right. And so then you start to think about that. And then when you assign a paycheck to it and those dynamics, and then a brand name and a title and an office and a view, all those things, then it becomes even more difficult to say, well, no, this is wrong. Like, just because I get all these things doesn't mean you get to treat me this way.
Right, right, but I mean, to your point, though, it feels familiar. There are vulnerabilities. Mita, I have to tell you, like, so part of my background, I'm a psychologist, I'm a marriage and family therapist, and well versed on relationship patterns that people will engage in. Choosing the same type of partner, getting into the same a familiar feeling relationship system, but I have never really considered it the same way, that there's this similar type of pattern repetition when it comes to work relationships, work environments, and that it's really important to be aware of those things. It's just part of, like, what do I need to do in order to be a healthy, happy person on a nice life trajectory? Like,
Yes,
this is an
absolutely.
important part of the work. And I
It
thank
is.
you.
Yeah, no, thank
Yeah.
you. And it was an epiphany I had not too long ago, but also after a series of thinking, like, either I've had just a ton of bad bosses, which is true because, like I said, when you're in organizations, there's some years where you have 3 bosses in a year. So I've worked for a while now, and there are a spectrum of bad bosses, but also when my confidence is low, when my boundaries aren't set, there are people that will be attracted to that to take advantage. And it's true just in the work you do, as you're saying, in relationships and families and with partners and spouses, but also in the workplace. Those are also relationships.
Interesting. So then the takeaway here, my friends, is just to start to get curious when things happen more than once, and just, we're not blaming ourselves, but like being curious. Um, and you also brought up something interesting, and I know you've written about this, that there are different types of toxic bosses. There's the shoe thrower, the salad thrower, but there's more, like even overly nice in some way. Bosses can be their own kind of toxic. Tell us more about, like, are there archetypes?
Yeah, I mean, I cover 13. There's more than 13, obviously. I also include myself in that. But one of the ones that I think is interesting is the cheerleader. I call him the
Mm,
cheerleader, who I really
that
liked
sounds
a
so
lot,
nice.
actually. Yeah, I really liked him. And he was smart and capable and liked his team and cared about us. He was like the corporate Pied Piper. People would follow him anywhere. I loved spending time with him in the office. Like, we all wanted to be near him. And he was filled with toxic positivity. And I'll never forget this one time when we had this cereal innovation that was launching, and I guess people were eating cereal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't recommend that, but it was doing really well. And we had someone from supply chain came to us and said, we can no longer produce the product. We're missing a key ingredient. It's going to be on hold for a while, which is pretty devastating blow to the business when you have something that's doing really well. And we're like, okay, there wasn't much workaround. And I'll never forget, he was like, we're going to add $1 million to the forecast for this product. And we're like, there's no ingredient. We can't do it. We can do it. We can do it. I believe in you all. What doesn't kill us kills you, makes you stronger. Like, hyping people up and using that positivity and weaponizing it.
Yeah, like it
try to
wasn't
guilt
based in
people.
reality.
Yes, guilt people to do something that it's just not possible. And what ended up happening is I'll fast forward, I'm in my performance review, I get, like, no merit increase, I get a bonus that won't even subsidize my Starbucks addiction, and then he says, "Well, I couldn't give you a better rating because you missed the $1,000,000 forecast." And there's a bit of gaslighting to that. I'm like, "But you were the one who added it, right?" But then it's like, totally forget, and I think that's really important in times when markets, I mean, change is a constant now, markets are in flux, there's no job security, loyalty is dead, all those things, and goals are changing. So if you give somebody a goal and you say, "By the end of this quarter, I want this done," and there were 10 things you needed to get that done, and now you only have 4 of those 10 things, it's just not possible. And yet you wanna surround yourself with yes people, and you wanna say you wanna be like a Instagram reel of all the sunshine,
And then
rainbow,
I
and
did
lollipops
this.
and puppies,
Yeah.
and you're like, "No, this is
Wow.
just not possible. We cannot get to this goal." And so I'm not telling people not to be optimistic. I'm a very optimistic person, otherwise I wouldn't continue to do this work. But at the same time, there's a dose of realism and getting into the trenches with your team and saying, "Okay, this is what I've recognized have changed." We either can get halfway there, quarter of the way there, or maybe not there at all, and we
Mhm.
have to revisit.
Yeah, very interesting. But that's subtle though, but really
Yes.
important because
Yeah.
it's like that you need to be able to co-create the shared definition of reality
Yes.
that these
Yes.
goals are based on. And if there's
Right.
somebody who's operating like outside of that's a warning sign that
It
it
is.
may not work out well for you. And is that what you would say is probably the biggest example of a boss incompetence that can negatively impact workers? Are there
Um,
other things?
I probably think there's 2 more. I mean, we've talked about the things that are like, the abusive type of boss, but I had the napper who I worked for who fell asleep in every meeting. It could be small, it could be large, and really, he fell asleep and back to mom, my mom who I talk to every day, remembered these stories and was like, "Hey, you should add this part. Remember he did this?" Like, all true stories. And it was really interesting because there was a moment I thought to myself, is he narcoleptic? Does he have a substance abuse problem? Is there
Yeah,
something
sleep
going on at
apnea.
home? Partner,
Yeah.
what's going
Mhm.
on? And then I remember there's a day where he's sitting in the cubicle next to me and he's taking a call from a recruiter and he makes like twice my salary. Like, and that's when you're like, wow, you are so disengaged and you dislike being here so much that you're not even going to a conference room. It's like the big middle finger. You're going to sit in the open area and just take a call from the recruiter. And this is one of the things that is so dangerous. And there's a famous quote that says, "Your culture becomes defined by the worst behavior you tolerate." And so
That's interesting. Your
when
culture
you
becomes
comes
defined by the
by the behavior,
worst
the worst behavior is
behavior
the
you
behavior you tolerate.
tolerate.
And
Yeah.
it does, and so you have this person constantly falling asleep, and it was the falling asleep was really symbolic of the absolute disengagement. It's like that downward spiral. He did not wanna be there, and yet years later, I'm like, "Why did they let him stay?" And being disengaged is so contagious because then it drags other people in, and I always say that we're all meant to do great things. And if you're not meant to do great things on my team, you're meant to do it somewhere else. So let me help you see that. And in The Devil Emails at Midnight, I include a really powerful question from Michael Murphy, who's at Harvard University. And it goes something like this: you take the person out, and I had a good leader teach me this. Dr. Lisa seems disengaged. All the signs are there. I'm going to take her out to lunch or coffee or hop on a Zoom outside of our regular scheduled work routine. And I'm just going to be a video recorder and say, here are the things I've observed. And I want to ask you, what would it take for you to be happy again at work? What would it take for you to be engaged? Wow. 3 things are going to happen. The bubble's going to burst, and you're going to be really open and honest and share. Right? And I might be able to help you. Number 2, you might share and I might not be able to help you. And number 3, you might just decide you don't want to talk about anything, in which case one of the options either going to stay or I'm going to help you move on to what you're meant to do next. And I wish more people had the courage to do that at work, that we had the courage to do that for each other. and say, because I've definitely been there. There have been moments where I've been in jobs where I've been in that downward spiral and I need to go because I'm not just becoming toxic to myself, but to others around me because I'm unhappy. And if we can help people move on, that's the biggest gift we can give them.
Oh, this is making me think of a conversation that I had not too long ago with a good friend who is a business owner, and she's a lovely, kind person, but was talking about feeling very frustrated with an employee, and what do I do here? And as she was talking, what was coming up for me is that this person that she was talking about had lots of gifts and strengths, but that the role that she was doing was literally the wrong role. Like that it was difficult for her to be successful in that specific position because there was a gap between what she was good at and what she needed to do. And we wound up talking about what a gift it is to have an employer or a mentor, somebody in your life tell you that out loud, that you would be happier and also probably more successful if you aligned your gifts to a role that matched those, as opposed to trying to force something that's probably never going to be a good fit. What a
Absolutely.
gift.
It is a
Yeah.
gift, and you know what usually happens? I'll bring up corporate jargon. Most people won't have the courage to have these conversations, so Dr. Lisa or Mita go on a performance improvement plan, a PIP. You're gonna be coached out, pipped out, rather than having this conversation and you say to me, "Honestly, I am unhappy and this isn't the right role for me," and I say, "Okay, let's think of an exit plan. I'll come back to you. How can we help you? I'm gonna help you move on externally, do right by you, and wish you all the best." But instead, most of us, and I've been guilty of this, won't have the courage to do that.
Right. It's hard. Well, and okay, so one variable here too, and this is something that I have encountered. I have had clients who have had this going on. We've worked through it. And I have also had employees or relationships with people in my organization who are coming in the door carrying trauma from other workplaces and who are reacting to me or other people like they expect abuse. I mean, I had one poor girl, she was like writing down her time in 15-minute increments and asking if she could take a bathroom break. It was a remote position. I was like, please stop. But it's like there's this hypervigilance and this fear that I think sometimes needs to be soothed coming into a healthier environment. And I've also seen it turn into negative assumptions about employers or supervisors that are not so much based on what is happening here and now, but kind of carrying over from past experiences that are getting projected on perhaps a boss or supervisor that is very well intentioned. And also, part of the responsibility of an effective boss is to talk about hard things in a constructive way, right? But that can feel very unsafe for someone who is carrying unresolved trauma.
That's certainly been me. I've done that on many occasions. I'll walk into a room, I'm the only woman of color, and I assume no one wants me in the room. Right? Those are the things. This we all have bias and stereotypes, but no one's done or said anything. And so to try to assume that people have positive intent until they show you otherwise, and this is hard, especially when your trust has been broken. But one of the things I coach people on in organizations and I've coached myself on is that one of the things that will happen when you finally leave, either by your own choice or someone else's choice, you have left a toxic workplace. You are like trying to regain yourself and find these pieces of yourself. And maybe you are taking time off by choice or not, or you're entering another workplace, is to go back to something that sparks joy for you and helps you rebuild your confidence. That could be an old childhood hobby. It could be making time for a hobby or a sport or an instrument that you haven't made time for. It could be volunteering in your community, donating time. It can be, for me, it was writing. I mean, that's when I went back to writing, right? To have that spark joy, but like, how can you rebuild confidence for yourself when it was stripped away for you at work? And that also helps. Then you start to assume As you build your confidence and you start rebuilding your boundaries, you also then start to see the positive intent and good in other people.
Yeah, definitely. That's such good advice. And also, to our friends here, that can take a while, right? Especially to your point, like if you've been disconnected from yourself and had to compartmentalize a couple of things, um, because part of the trauma experience is not just having intrusive feelings, but it's this like numbness that comes along with it. And so to look for ways of reconnecting with yourself and things that bring you pleasure and joy, but also confidence and just bit by bit, that's a very empowering piece of advice. And and I know, gosh, I feel like I could just sit here and talk to you all day. I want to be respectful of your time, though. I'm wondering, though, if you could share with some of our friends, because I know that people are like, what are they going to talk about? Like, what to do? I mean, for somebody who realizes that they are in a negative situation or that, things are happening that are really not tolerable. I mean, I think some people fantasize about the big mic drop and like
Yes.
walking out the door,
Yeah,
but also, I mean, real reality is like they don't want to burn down their career.
of course.
Can you stand up to people? Um, are there recommendations for how to nope on out of there in a
Yeah.
semi graceful
I'm
way?
sure. I think one of the first things is start documenting things, facts versus feelings. Particularly, the feelings are important, but the facts so you can see what's happening. Particularly if you're working for a boss who's gaslighting you in any way and you're like, "What's happening? I thought this was true and it's not." You use the word shared reality. Wow. Like, shouldn't we have the same reality? We don't, right? And so being able to then say, "Let me assess," right? I think the next thing is context situation matters. If you're working for a notorious micromanager, how long can you do that for versus the Chanel shoe throwing boss? They're both bad bosses at different levels. So I might say, my plan is I'm going to work for this person for 6 to 8 months. And in this time, I have a concrete plan. I'm going to make sure I get these three things out of the role and I'm going to make sure they're on my resume. I might even go ahead and write my resume up that section so that I can almost create the vision forward of what I'll actually put on there. Because if I'm going to tolerate whatever I'm tolerating, create an expiration date. And then, you have to start activating the exit plan. And so it's too easy for people to say you should resign tomorrow. That's just not the reality for all kinds of things. But you want to have the resume ready. You want to start networking, you want to start meeting people, you want to start thinking about what do I want to do next? And then also, if you have, and this is important, trusted colleagues at work. I wouldn't tell everybody, but if there's a few people who you trust to talk to, do that. And you don't always have to leave the company. We talked about this earlier. You could actually find another role within the company, but it starts planning. You have to create the plan and work the plan and do it every day. And so that you can eventually move on to a healthier, happier environment.
Right. This is interesting. Like what you're describing is a intentional duality. You are showing up, you're doing the job, you're, functioning. And at the same time, though, it's like there's this internal resistance, like this guerrilla force that's like making other plans and being intentional about why you're here, taking care of yourself in a very deliberate way, and operating. And I don't want to make this seem like it is deceitful, but there's a part of you that exists that you have withdrawn from the role while you are still showing up and doing your work and all of the things. But that's part of that, not just an escape plan, but a preservation of the self. Yeah, that's fantastic. Wow. You've shared so much amazing advice and just helpful real world examples, and thank you for being so generous and sharing your own story. What is like one thing that you would have wished someone had said to you at that time that you might articulate for the benefit
Yeah.
of the listener who needs to hear this?
If I could go back, just tell myself not to give up on me. Don't give up on yourself, and that there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. I can't tell you how long or short it's going to be, but also that I think all the things we talked about, whether it's the isolation, the guilt, the shame, all of those things, all of the emotions, what what it leads to is that you feel like you don't have agency or the ability to act. And what we're saying here today is that we're not telling you to resign or quit tomorrow. We're telling you to take some of that power back so that you can figure out how you find that light at the end of the tunnel, because it's there and it's waiting for you. And don't give up on yourself, and don't give your power away to all these people that are hurting and harming you in the workplace.
Thank you so much for giving that a voice. And also the importance of allies, right?
Yes,
That if
exactly.
you're around all of these people and these systems that are damaging, like who can you affiliate with? So like reading your book would be a fantastic example. Trusted friends. I will share as a resource, there are not many therapists who do this. And there are some licensed therapists who actually specialize in career counseling and professional development. They have specialized graduate degrees and a training process so that they are very intimately aware of some of the complexities of workplace trauma, workplace relationships, and sometimes can have a uniquely helpful
Mm,
perspective that
I
is
love that.
different
Yes,
than a standard issue therapist, and is also quite different than what you might find with a regular career counselor who's
sure.
often just about helping you like pivot into a different role or
Yep.
job and let's look at your
Edit the
resume. It's not
resume,
the
LinkedIn profile. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like the emotional pieces, but you're out they're out there, you guys. Yeah. So, well, so tell us more about how people can stay connected with you, because I'm sure that friends listening to this are like, I just need to listen to Mita every day
Oh,
because she will save me.
oh, thank you so much
How
for
do they do
creating
that?
such a wonderful space for this conversation. I hope you all will go check out The Devil Emails at Midnight, What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, your local independent bookstore, and you can find me on mitamallick.com. I'm open for speaking engagements on the book, and then also LinkedIn. It's my social media platform of choice. I love meeting new people, so feel free to send me a DM, especially after you read the book. I'd love to hear what you think. And thank you so much, Dr. Lisa. This was an amazing conversation.
This was such a pleasure. And I learned a lot from you today. So I really
Oh,
appreciate
likewise.
this.